I know this might surprise a lot of the people on the internet, but nobody likes a know-it-all. Hello friends, welcome back to the Rhetoric of Science, or more accurately, the rhetoric of popularization. Science communicators may be the most common or well-known of the popularizers, but that doesn't mean that other people can't do it too. When I was doing research on the ways that popularizers, or the people who share some kind of academic knowledge with the public, approach their audiences, I noticed a pretty surprising pattern, and we've already seen glimpses of it in the videos we've done on the topic before. So you might remember, for example, that Derek from Veritasium transitioned from going out on the street to record people's misconceptions about science to going to the LA reservoir to ask questions about things he didn't know. Or you might remember the rhetorical differences between Diana, aka Physics Girl's video designed to help people prepare for a physics test, versus the one where she sat on her living room floor and talked about force and acceleration with the help of chocolate chips and bananas. So we've seen that effective science communication is a practice in showing people why science is cool that involves portraying yourself as something more like a science enthusiast friend than a teacher. It's not enough just to share the facts. You also need to recognize that non-scientists may not be as intrinsically motivated by the dry realities of science as you are. And it's also not just a matter of showing up with knowledge and then dispensing it. It's important to craft an identity that audiences will find sufficiently trustworthy and engaging. But in order to do that, a lot of popularizers do something that I think is pretty interesting. Even though we tend to think of them as experts, they actually often do a lot to avoid portraying themselves as the smartest one in the room. Of course, they remain knowledgeable, but they don't want to be perceived as know-it-alls. So let me show you what I mean. Wait, what do you mean? Whoa, how did you do this? Oh, yeah, you're right. I mean, man, getting shrink rate can really be distracting. But anyway, in the video, Someone Dead Ruined My Life, again, CGP Grey's animated self pulls an unsuspecting analog for the viewer into a back room to tell them the story of his arduous journey to find the origins of the name Tiffany. And hey, speaking of someone dead, I've kind of always meant to ask. I mean, you are a skull. Okay, well, maybe another day. Back to the video. What unfolds here isn't an authoritative rundown of everything Grey knows now. Instead, it's really a dramatization of the learning process. He scours old books, wanders libraries, chases footnotes and cross-references. At every step, a new obstacle arises, and he finds a way to overcome it. In other words, the video leads with Grey's ignorance. He doesn't know the answer to his question, but he's not going to let anything stop him from finding out what it is. Grey isn't teaching us something so much as showing us how he learned it. But you might be asking, what is there to gain from showing the learning process instead of just telling us what he learned? I mean, you know, there are people out there who would complain that he spent 21 minutes telling us what he could have just told us in 8. And, well, then I'd point you to the shorter video that pretty much does just that and then ask you 2 questions. 1, what are you in such a hurry for? And 2, even though the shorter video exists, why then make a video showing us the longer tangential version? In other words, how does your experience of the video, the content, the personality of the creator change when they don't present themselves as the source of all truth, but instead as someone who doesn't know anything and is trying to learn? On some level, it changes from a video where somebody teaches you something and becomes a video where you and the creator get to learn something together. You're on equal footing in a sense, and the video becomes less about the facts and more about the process of finding those facts. And of course, there's room for humor, detours, course corrections, and spirals into uncertainty all along the way. If you think everything needs to be maximally efficient all the time, you may find that frustrating. But then these are the realities of learning. It's not a simple transaction of knowledge, and it can be just as full of backing out of dead ends as it is making actual progress. So it's not just another YouTube personality refusing to get to the point for the sake of watch time. The goal is not to create an encyclopedia entry in video form, it's something else. And in this case, I see Grey making a choice, not just to inform a viewer, but maybe to empower them. Sure, he could just spill the beans from the start, but then the viewers would miss out on the chance to see that even knowledgeable internet stick figure still needs to learn, that not knowing something isn't an issue, that learning is always possible, and that frustrations and wrong turns are a natural and normal part of that process. If the smart internet person doesn't know things, it's okay for you not to know them too. And if that smart internet person can wade into a difficult learning process and come out the other side having learned something, so can you. You can indeed learn things, and you don't need to worry if that learning process starts to get difficult. So this is a video that isn't content just to give you a fact and then send you on your way. It's a video that wants to show you what it's really like to learn something, and maybe even to encourage you on your own way to learning things. Grey shows you how it's done, so what else could be holding you back? Now, what happens when a research psychologist decides to make a video about healing crystals? Well, rather than taking the charmless route that amateur scientists love to take and just dismiss it all as pseudoscience, BrainCraft's Vanessa Hill decides, like Grey, to see what it's all about. So, just as in the previous video, Hill leads with her not knowing something. She acknowledges that she has some preconceived ideas about all that crystal stuff, but she puts them on hold to try to learn something about the underlying psychology. But unlike in Grey's video, we don't just watch Hill read books and learn something. We don't, in other words, just observe Hill's journey from ignorance to expertise. Instead, she adds another dimension in giving up the know-it-all role by letting other people be the experts in her video. So she interviews Professor Timothy Caulfield to learn about the psychology of crystal use. And she also interviews Shannon from the YouTube channel Reiki Gem Wellness to get a sense of what crystal users are really thinking about when they're hanging out with stones. And as always, it's not really important for our purposes what the conclusion of the video is or what you think of it. We're focused on understanding how people communicate. And it's interesting to see that Hill chooses to communicate by stepping back and letting other people be the experts. So, like the CGP Grey video, we do get the same benefits of watching a knowledgeable person learn. But we also see an added element in the viewer-creator relationship. Not only is Hill our co-learner showing us how to learn, she's also someone who can give us access to experts we might not normally have access to. And on some level, that feels like an act of generosity. She could have just said, hey everyone, I interviewed some people and here's where I come down on the whole thing. But instead, she effectively becomes both our co-learner and also someone with some exclusive access, like a friend with a backstage pass, if you will. And by doing that, she avoids saying, listen up, because I've got something to teach you, and instead says, hey, come see what learning's all about. Really, when you think about it, she's showing us not just why knowledge of psychology is awesome or useful, but also why the methods for learning are awesome and useful. The fun of science isn't just in the results, but in the process, and the discovering can be just as rewarding as the discovery. Which brings us to our laminar flow loving friend, Destin Sandlin from SmarterEveryDay. In his video, Why Laminar Flow is All Caps Awesome, he sets out to tell us in true epideictic fashion why laminar flow is awesome. So, the rocket scientist starts the video showing us what laminar flow looks like.
I should be able to poke a hole in this pool and get a glassy looking jet that comes out this pool. That's what laminar flow is. It's very orderly, looks like glass. Okay, so here we go. Ready? 3, 2, this feels so wrong. Let's see if we got laminar flow. No, we don't. We don't. Now I've got a hole in a pool. Okay, laminar flow is a function of geometry. Obviously, I had the wrong geometry. We're gonna try a big spike. Here we go. Oh, golly. Okay. All right. No, it doesn't work.
Or at least he intends to, and as you saw, fails spectacularly. So, right from the start, nobody could accuse him of being a know-it-all. The first thing he does is fail at demonstrating laminar flow. It's not rocket science, but maybe it should have been. But what's really interesting about this video is where Destin goes to find a competent demonstration of laminar flow. And maybe just take a second to think about where you would go. If you were a rocket scientist, who would you ask to show everyone an example of laminar flow in action? Exactly right, your local science fair winner.
Okay, now I'll blow them out. And
okay, and so that's gonna make the smoke come through this pipe right here, right?
yep. Now I'll turn the fan on.
So got to get the light correct, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's pulling it through. Should we be able to see it yet?
Yeah, you can already see it.
You can already see. Oh, what the heck? You sure can. Look at that. Oh, that's cool. Look at that. Okay, cool. So laminar flow are the straight lines that go across, correct?
Yep.
So that's a 0 angle of attack.
Yes.
So give me a real high angle of attack. So there you go. Look at that. So we're getting flow separation along the backside here, and we get turbulence back in here, right?
Mm-hmm. Let's see.
Is this like the coolest science fair project you ever done?
It's the only science fair project we've ever done.
Look at that turbulence back there. So ultimately, what were you trying to learn here?
Basically, I was just trying to learn more about airfoil shapes and flow separation and stall and make a good visual representation of all those things.
Well, I think you accomplished that. Look, man, look at it from this angle right here. You can see, look, you can see the separation back there. Look at that. That's a really good angle.
Now, dear viewer, tell me, why would you let a kid from the public school be the expert in your video about laminar flow when you no doubt know volumes more about the topic than she does? Why show your viewers a school project when you could probably just take them to a professionally engineered wind tunnel? Well, for one, we get all the benefits that we got in the last two videos. We can see our popularizer leading with a lack of knowledge that puts us on even footing as co-learners, and we get the benefit of gaining access to experts that we wouldn't normally have access to. But we get something extra when the expert is a girl from the local school and not a distinguished professor of aerodynamics or fluid mechanics. And this might be what I admire most about the video. We get to see that anyone can be an expert. Sure, you can get expertise from fancy degrees and complicated job titles, but even a kid can have valuable knowledge to contribute to our understanding of science. And that might suggest that we too can claim to be knowledgeable even if we don't have all the same formal training. Now, to be clear, we are talking about degrees of expertise. This isn't to diminish Destin's engineering expertise or to say that a middle schooler's take on crystal healing is exactly equivalent to a professor of psychology's take. But it is to say that by adopting this strategy, Destin shows that knowledge is not the exclusive domain of the credentialed experts. If a kid can have something valuable to say about laminar flow, well, then you don't need to feel intimidated by it, and you can have some confidence that the things you do know are also valuable. Maybe you don't have enough formal training to teach at a college or university, but that doesn't make you a know-nothing. You might just have something useful to teach a rocket scientist after all. Well, now this has been fun. I mean, just think of all the quality time we can start spending together now. Well, don't rule it out. Anyway, of course, this is not an exhaustive list of all the ways that popularizers have given up or could give up the role of know-it-all expert, but they are clear examples of the larger pattern. Overall, you might say that the traditional idea of knowledge puts people on a hierarchy of sorts. There are the experts and then the rest of us. By the nature of their expertise, popularizers often do have a higher degree of knowledge than most of their audience, but curiously, they also seem to do a lot to flatten out that hierarchy, to shrink their own expert presence down in order to situate themselves more as peers to their viewers than as peerless intellects. So while there are videos, of course, that we can point to where popularizers' expertise is on full display, it's interesting to see just how often they avoid that strategy, and to notice just how successfully they can attract and keep an audience by downplaying their expertise. In the end, the popularizer's goal is not to impress you with their knowledge, it's to continue sharing knowledge with you. And to that end, it's a lot more advantageous to be the kind of person that a viewer will be willing to spend time with regularly than to be the smartest person in the room. So our takeaways might be something like this. Don't be shy about the limits of your own knowledge. Treat your audience like respected equals. Give other people a chance to be the experts, whether they're professors or science fair winners, and you'll be well on your way to building the kind of goodwill that will support your larger objective of sharing knowledge with your audience. In fact, maybe paradoxically, I think the popularizer's willingness not to be the expert is the surest sign of their expertise. It's a commonplace that the more someone learns, the more they realize they don't know. Experts are more comfortable with not knowing, more willing to learn from others, and less desperate to prove themselves. So, yes, avoiding the know-it-all role is a sound rhetorical strategy, but it might also just come naturally with the self-assurance of their own expertise. Really, between you and me, it's the almost experts, the ones who don't quite know enough yet to know the limits of their own knowledge, that you really need to watch out for. They're the ones who will show up in a popularizer's comment section saying things like, "They're surprised you didn't mention X," or "I can't believe you didn't spend more time explaining Y," or "I honestly can't comprehend why you'd waste so much of your video on unscientific stuff like poking holes in pools and interviewing school kids." These are the ones who, by making such a show of how much they know, unwittingly reveal a lot about how much they still have to learn. But luckily for us, science communicators and popularizers of other disciplines are a constant reminder that we can always learn something new, and that learning is for everyone, whether you have access to formal education or not. Highly specialized expertise and credentials may create the sense that knowledge is somehow exclusive, but research scientists aren't better or smarter people than science communicators or you and me. They're just people doing a different job with different methods. Besides, the knowledge that really matters can and should benefit everyone, even if that benefit only happens when you look at laminar flow with greater appreciation or chuckle every time you think about the historical complexities of the name Tiffany. And speaking of benefits, I really do mean it. I think we could have some great hangout on the shelf times. Like, you could shrink down a Scrabble board or something, and then we could just have the best time. Hey, don't write it off. I mean, well, okay, just give yourself a minute to warm up to the idea. But in the meantime,
Thanks to all of you for watching. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you in video form. We didn't really talk about it too explicitly, but how do you think these ideas could help you to be a better writer, even if you aren't trying to do the same thing as science communicators?
As long as you promise not to be a know-it-all, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. But that'll be it for us today, so thanks again, and we'll be back next week.